Hey there, it's Melissa Brunetti, and welcome to the Mind Your Own Karma podcast. Hey there, Karma crew. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Mind Your Own Karma Beyond the Bandage. I want you to know that if you pressed play on this particular episode, I know one thing about you. You're ready to explore the hidden forces behind your well-being, maybe even the ones you've never been taught to see. Today's guest is Dr. Rita Louise, a best-selling author, seasoned medical intuitive, and a founder of the Institute of Applied Energetics. She's been on more podcasts than you've had bad dates, and she's not afraid to tell it like it is. With her unique approach, blending mindfulness, energy work, and just the right dose of real talk, Dr. Rita helps people uncover the deep emotional patterns impacting their health. We'll dive into how our buried thoughts and emotions manifest physically, how energy healing works, and how you can begin to shift your energy and your life today. It's time to rip off the bandage and dive in because this episode might just change your life. Karma crew, we are welcoming Dr. Rita to the show today. Hi, Dr. Rita.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. I have been watching you on YouTube and Spotify, and I'm super excited to have you here today. You're a medical intuitive and energy healer, along with a bunch of other things, which I think a lot of people have heard about, but maybe don't fully understand what that means. So can you start by giving us a sense of what that means in your work?
Sure. And I'm going to give the very simple answer because your listeners, I'm sure, will be able to hear this. So a medical intuitive is someone who's a psychic who talks to you about your health.
Awesome.
Bam, that's it.
Yeah, that's awesome. How did you discover that you had this gift?
So I just wanted to be Rita the psychic chick. That was my goal. And I went to the Berkeley Psychic Institute and studied with them. But even it wasn't until after I had finished, I came to the realization that I would have someone come and sit in front of me for like an energy work session, and I would be working on them and go, oh, cesarean or hysterectomy, because they would have like this line going down the center of their stomach.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd be like, oh, cesarean. And I noticed that I was finding a lot of people's health concerns in my work, which caused me to go back to school and get a degree as a naturopath because, people would be coming to me, for whatever. And
Yeah, and you're
okay,
like,
so this was like a million years ago. And I had this woman come and I'm doing an energy work session and I'm like, wow, you have this, and this is very technical medically, this glop of black energy sitting in the middle of your back. And I'm kind of looking and going, I think that's your kidney. Yeah, that's your kidney area. And now I can sit there and go, okay, there's inflammation in your kidney and it's not draining correctly, and there's some stones in it or gravel, or, one seems like there's an infection in it, the other one seems okay. So going back to school gave me brain food to compare and contrast. This is what it's supposed to be, and this is what you have.
Yeah, a little bit of clarity there.
A lot of
Did you have those gifts as a child? Like how did that show up in your life as a kid?
So I became interested in the whole concept of ESP when I was about 12 or 13. I don't know how old you are, but there was a series called The Amazing Kreskin, who was a mentalist and he had ESP. And I decided that that's what I wanted to do. And so I moved from the archaeology and anthropology section at the library to the ESP area, which was about 8 books, next to the witchcraft, which I didn't touch. And haven't really moved from that, and have spent the bulk of my life reading dry, boring books on healing and personal growth and whatever. But my goal, at the time they would say, if you became enlightened, air quote, then you would get psychic abilities kind of as a byproduct of
Mm,
being enlightened. So I felt pretty enlightened, but I didn't feel necessarily psychic. So I went to the Berkeley Psychic Institute. And after being in their program for 3 weeks, I came to the realization that I had been very psychic my whole life.
wow.
And when you walk up to someone at work, and very short story, he wasn't there the day before. And not that I'm a smart ass, but maybe sometimes. And I walked up to him, looked him in the face, crossed my arms, and said, "Well, where were you yesterday? Having them check for a brain tumor?" That's where he was the day
Yeah.
before. But I never went, "Oh, you just had a psychic moment."
Yeah.
So all of these things, 30 years later, all fell into place like, oh, you really were pretty psychic your whole life, but you didn't know it.
Yeah. That's cool. So when you sense somebody's energy, what's the first thing that you look for and what does it tell you before they even say anything to you?
So I'm real visual. And so the way that so if I'm doing an energy work session, that's totally different. But when I'm working with a client regarding health concerns, I have a very different approach because I can sit there and start at the top of your head and go through all your organs and glands, and I may or may not hit what you're coming to me for. So I have found that if you come and say, well, I've been having stomach upsets or I have this going on, then we can actually spend the time dissecting what's going on, talk about what's happening physically as well as what's going on emotionally and spiritually, because 90% of the time there is some psycho-spiritual piece that's tied to the disease.
Yeah.
And many people don't recognize the correlation between the two.
Yeah. I do ultrasound 3 days a week, and I've been doing that for 35 years. My listeners have heard me say this a bunch. But I see patients year after year for the same pain, and there's nothing wrong. Like they've had CTs, MRIs, all the tests. They can't find nothing wrong with them. But they're like, I have this pain right here. They could point right to it. And it's like, you know, I'm also a somatic practitioner, and I want to say, well, maybe you want to, think go in a different direction here, but I can't, when I'm at work. But 100% agree that so many times that whatever's going on in our bodies is some trauma or something that's stuck or energy that's stuck or, who knows. But yeah.
Well, and sometimes I kind of trip them out because I'll go, okay, so this is the emotional energy. And then I timeline and go, so when you were 8 or 9, again, I'm very visual. So I see this kid and I have to kind of put a date
Hmm.
on it. So, like when you were 8 or 9, there was this really big trauma that happened and it left you feeling invisible or left you feeling, however, and then they start crying because that was the year like their grandmother died, or their parents got divorced, but that's the core. That's where the trauma got solidified in their
Yeah.
space. And then over the years, it just grew and grew till finally it's manifesting in their body.
Do you find some of the things might be even from the womb or prior generations or even past lives?
So there is stuff that comes up from in the womb. For me, all right, there are a lot. I have certain things that I will and will not look at. And so I draw the line at the womb, and so if I have somebody that comes to me and I'm looking through their timeline and I find nothing. I mean, I
Mhm.
find absolutely nothing that could cause what's going on. Then I'll share with them. It's like, so it must have been prior. I mean, I can look in the womb, but prior to conception that you had this experience, and then I shut up because I do not want to contaminate the person, and I will refer them to a person that does
Mm.
past life therapy so that they can go and have that experience and clear it, because I can talk to them about this is where I see the trauma came from, but it doesn't fix it, so, and contamination, especially with past life stuff, can be crucial.
So what do you mean by contamination? What can happen?
So there are people that will say, oh, well, I was told by a psychic that I was Cleopatra in my
Mm,
past life, contamination, and they hold on to that. And I think it's much more valuable for them to go and explore what's going on because the lifetime they're showing me might have just been the most recent life that they had that situation. And really, the origin might have gone back much further in time that wasn't necessarily revealed to me in that moment.
yeah. When you work with people that are carrying years of emotional residual stuff, when someone's energetically shut down or numb, what's your go-to way to crack that layer open?
I am really a believer in mindfulness and paying attention to what's going on in yourself in that moment. Um, Usually people that don't want to heal don't call.
Yeah.
But then there are people that you sit there and say, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no, no, no. And even though you're telling them, they don't necessarily want to hear it,
Yeah.
you know?
I had one client when I was practicing on people, if I was doing it for free, my somatic work. She was wearing the badge of I've tried everything. I've tried EMDR and I've tried hypnotherapy, and just the list went on, and it was like none of it's worked. And I felt like, well, I felt like this was just going to be another, and that didn't work either. Like her mindset was already
Hmm.
nothing can help me. And I'm like, well, then nothing's going to help you. But she was trying all these modalities, just to say, I tried all of them, nothing works. I'm so damaged. It's like,
I
okay.
mean, I had a lady, I used to do a lot of wellness expos, and I had a lady sit down and she wanted a reading. And when I'm at an expo, I do a card reading. It's fast, it's easy. I can knock it out in 15 minutes. And I just kept getting about this guy who was like her age. So it wasn't father, grandfather, wasn't child. So in her generation, that was like sucking the life out of her. And she was like, no, 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 there's not anybody. There's not anybody. And when I'm working with someone, I'll just say spirit will just keep bringing the message back and bringing the message back. And I can't move on. I can't move on to another topic until I feel like internally they get it. And it's not my choice. It is
Yeah.
really not my choice. And so, and I'm so about my integrity. But now I'm like kind of making stuff up so I can get through this 15 minutes because all I'm getting is this guy and this guy and this guy. She writes me a check. She's getting up out of the chair. She puts her hand on the back of the chair and she looks at me and she goes, oh, my brother's schizophrenic and he lives with me. And I'm like, okay. I don't get it. I mean, I felt very validated in that moment, but she
Right.
could have had a great session.
It's so funny. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Clients can be really funny. They, have this huge breakthrough, and you're like, that's what I've been trying to. They're like, oh, well, I had this thing.
But
Does
I
that
mean,
count?
we didn't even, there was obviously some very strong energy and some message that I was supposed to give her,
Yeah.
which she never got.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there one energetic pattern that you kind of see repeat in people who are physically sick? Um, what usually is lying beneath that?
I mean, other than saying that there's suppressed trauma, I mean, that's kind of the biggest umbrella. But trauma can sit in different organs and manifest in different ways depending on what organ it's sitting in. Um, so there's that. And I wish I could be more specific, but it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
Um, with the caveat that most of the trauma that people experience that are manifesting physical disease usually happens very early on. I mean, I've had a
Mm,
few people where they've had like bad relationship stuff in their 20s and 30s, but that's kind of a minimum. Usually it's preteen in that area. But
Mm,
the other part that is a chunk is neglect, that
mm,
people don't want to take care of themselves. They don't want to work on themselves. They sit there and complain, oh, well, I have all this stuff that I need to do. It's like, well, then just do one thing, do one little thing a day. And they can't do that. They
yeah,
can't own that.
yeah. Sometimes intuitive hits and clinical knowledge don't line up medically. When your medical training and your intuitive knowing kind of clash with somebody, what voice do you trust?
Not the medical.
I knew you were going to say that.
Well, and there's what they taught in school, which really wasn't that bad, and then there's my opinion of the medical profession now because they really operate based on evidence-based medicine. And, so if you recommend an herb, well, there haven't been any clinical trials to prove the efficacy of that supplement, so don't take it. It's like, I'm not feeling it. So so there's just like a giant clash right there. Yeah, me going to the doctor, that's always an experience.
Right. I know. Do you go to have your checkups and stuff? I mean, do you,
I mean, I go and then I argue with them. I
can
mean,
you tell when, like, can you read yourself?
not super specifically, but I'm sensitive enough to know this isn't right.
Mm,
It's just sometimes I need for that. I mean, I'm not a sickly person, but I'll go if there's something that I feel isn't right and I'll let them do their test. And then it's like, okay, thanks. And then I go do my thing,
hmm.
and fix it. But recently, all right, I'm totally disclosing here. So I have had old lady bladder, and I made the
Hmm.
conscious decision to start taking a bladder control medication because I was waking up 5 and 6 times a night and it just wasn't working for me. So I took the medication for a month, and then this ear just like stopped working.
Oh, wow.
Stopped working. And the whole side of my face was congested, and this lymph node was just a giant knot. And I finally, after seeing 3 doctors, went to a ENT, and he was like, "Oh, well, there might be a tumor and there might be this and there might be that." And I'm like, "I'm telling you, it's the freaking medication." No, 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 that's not one of the side effects. So then I found like studies that showed that 5% of the people, especially women over 60, can have the ear thing happen.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I haven't heard that
Yeah.
from any of
So
my
for all
patients.
of your listeners, if you have sudden hearing
And my
loss,
patients, I'll have to remember. Yeah.
especially on one side, it is considered a medical emergency and you should
Mm.
go to the doctor right away.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like a real doctor, not
Yeah.
your primary care that looks in there and go, there isn't any wax.
Yeah. A lot of general doctors probably don't even know that could be a thing. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So, for people that are just kind of trying to tune in to themselves, and if you could give listeners one mini experiment that they could do at home to feel their own energy shift, what could they do?
Ooh, great question. Trying to think of something. So if they're feeling like an ache or a pain somewhere, okay, we'll go with ache or pain. If they just take their hands and just kind of rest it on that area and then ask their body, ask that
Mm,
part, what do you need?
yeah.
What do you want from me?
Yeah.
And then listen, and that voice comes in, like just this silent or, soft spoken voice in your head. And sometimes what they want might seem really weird,
Yep.
and that's okay. You
Hmm.
know, but it doesn't come that way for everyone. Sometimes you might be watching a TV commercial, like you sit there and you ask and you don't really get an answer, but then you put the TV on and the first thing that comes up is a commercial for some supplement that is tied to your complaint,
Yeah,
and so you might get that information from other sources other than that hearing, because we all have different ways that we access information. Some people are more visual, some people are more auditory. Um, but I mean, I've had messages come through on the radio, which
well,
sounds really weird, but and you might be having a random conversation with someone and they might be listening to this show and go, "Oh yeah, I took that bladder control medication and I had my ear like crap out too." You know.
yeah, we tune out so much that we forget to look for the synchronicities and things, you know. They're
Well,
often overlooked.
there are so many people that want to learn to be intuitive and how to tap into that information, but the biggest part of it is the listening part
Hmm.
and the paying attention part and the being mindful part, because that is the experience.
Yeah. And so many people are just doing the total opposite of that right now and just checking out when we really should be checking in.
Well, it's
Yeah.
interesting because I feel like there is becoming more and more of a divide,
Yeah,
that there are a big group of people that really have started tuning in and into what's going on and being more perceptive and, empathic or perceptive of what's going on. And then there's the other group that, is
that's
just
true.
there.
Yeah, there is an awakening on both sides. Well, not awakening on one and an awakening on the other, I should say. So let's get a little cosmic for a second.
Okay.
So you've explored ancient mysteries, soul entanglements, and even other worldly influences. How do those themes, if they do, how do those show up in your healing work?
Well, I mean, ancient mysteries, not so much, other than, traditions that have been passed on to us, I mean, because herbal medicine go
Yeah.
back to the Neolithic, you know, energy medicine, as far as we know, goes back, documentation wise to Egypt and the Babylonians, because they were the first ones that have documents, Chinese.
Hmm.
Um, so when I'm working, I communicate with my guides, or I might communicate with your guides. Don't ask me which, because I don't really care.
I
I
was gonna say it
joke,
doesn't matter.
well, I joke around that I have the peanut gallery, and it's these guides that always sit off to this side.
Mm.
And they're the best backseat psychics, because if I try to ask them a question, I get nothing. But if I'm telling a client, oh, blah, 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 then they'll be like, no, don't tell her that. Tell her this. And then they
Huh.
give me like this very random, weird information. Oh, and they're really funny. People's guides, I mean, I don't know if it's just me, but people's guides are hysterical. And and they will just like say stuff. But and this is a new development in my personal development in the last couple of years, few years. They just tell me random things and it'll be a word. So when spirit talks to us, it's not in this lengthy like, hey, Melissa, you should do this, and here's the rationale. They'll just be like, they'll just give you like a one-liner, and that's it. And so, as an example, I was working with a woman who had like kidney stones, kidney ground, kidney something. It's been a while, but I remember it was kidney. And I hear I thought I muted everything. Anyway, and I hear the word hydrangea.
Hmm.
That was my thought. And I'm thinking, okay, you got hydrangeas in the yard, why? But, I was like, okay, hear and validate. And I looked it up. This was before the internet totally changed and you could actually still find health and healing information on it. And I looked up hydrangea for kidney issues, and bam, it was actually a thing. And it was actually a thing for the exact issue she was having.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's yeah, random, very random.
Yeah, that is random. So I have a book that you can look up different ailments and things, and it can kind of point you to what might be what's it connected to, you know. Do you believe that that is true, that like certain ailments and things are connected to maybe a specific trauma or
I do. So I'm assuming that you're thinking about this, you can heal your life or whatever it is. I think that it's a little bit generic, um, because there are a lot of manifestations of that potential core issue, or it might not be the only issue. But
Mhm.
if you're starting with nothing, it still is better than nothing.
Yeah. It's like an encyclopedia. I wish I had it near me so I could show you, but it's like a huge book.
Okay, then
Um,
not the book that I was thinking of.
yeah, it's kind of like almost like a dictionary encyclopedia, and you look up, you know, psoriasis or something, and it's like most likely connected to, you know, this, that, and the other. Um, I don't know.
Well,
For myself, I haven't found it too helpful, but
well, as an example, I had a client who, I don't remember what he came for, but we ended up talking about his gallbladder. And maybe I was doing energy work, and I'm like talking about this energy where his gallbladder was supposed to be. And he goes, "Oh, well, I don't have a gallbladder." But, it doesn't take the energy away.
yeah,
And so I was like, well, what I'm looking at was you couldn't plan your way out of a paper bag, and different organs have like a general category. So the liver is about anger and frustration, where the gallbladder is about planning.
okay,
The small intestine's about separating like the wheat from the chaff, which impact how we operate.
hmm,
Um, and I looked at him, I'm like, well, you couldn't plan your way out of the paper bag. And I said, but it's not that it's broken. I said, so which would be a very different thing, like if you're having gallbladder issues, I would assume it would say, well, you're having issues with planning, but he was never taught to plan, never taught. And I made that comment. He goes, yeah, I don't have a gallbladder. My mom don't have a gallbladder. My grandmother doesn't have a gallbladder, and my aunt doesn't have a gallbladder. And none of them can plan.
wow, that's interesting. If someone comes to you carrying energetic baggage that necessarily isn't their own baggage, how do you help someone disentangle from that outside influence from causing harm in their bodies eventually when it's not theirs to carry? Maybe generational trauma or, you know.
I mean, I don't really deal with generational trauma, because I believe that that's more of a mindset behavioral thing. Like the guy with the gallbladder, he was
Hmm.
never taught to plan. Someone who has diabetes, it's that the family acts in a certain way, and a certain set of beliefs and emotions are passed down generation to generation, but it's not,
More of a
in
learned
my
thing.
part, trauma. It's
Hmm.
um and as far as other people's energy, we allow other people's energy into our space, but well, no, I'm going to take that back. I have seen other people's energy in people's body. So hang on a second. Let me reformat that answer. I mean, but for the most part, we don't allow other people's energy into our body. And if it does come in our body, again, it's during those formative years. It's usually a parent.
Hmm.
Uh, like you always find mom sitting there. Sometimes it might be a girlfriend or a boyfriend. Um, but help. So when I have people like that, doing energy work with them, helping them to separate out, this is who I am, and this is who they are, so that you can separate out, this is me and this is not me. Because if they have that energy in their space, usually it's trying to control and suppress who they are as a
Hmm.
human being, which is why that organ or gland isn't working, because it wants to act this way and it can't, because these judgments or opinions or viewpoints of this other person. See, so again, this psycho-spiritual aspect is impacting them on a functional level.
Yeah. Is there, when someone comes to see you, do you clear that? Or is there something that you like guide them to do to clear something like that?
It depends on the person. When it gets into that kind of depth, separating out what's going on, I definitely would work with the person. Um, I think that there's a lot, my perfect client is someone who really wants to engage in the healing process.
Hmm.
And, so I can work with you, and then I'm going to send you with some homework so that you can continue this process and move forward.
Yeah.
Because if you're just relying on me to do it, it's going to take a really long time,
Yeah.
or it
Yep.
might not work.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's exactly the same as what I expect out of my clients. And um, yeah, it's teaching them how to heal themselves, really,
Hmm.
because we forget that we know how to do that. There's so much we can do on our own. We give our power away to so many other medical professionals and medications and all kinds of things just to numb out and that's we give our power away. We give our healing power away.
But, we've been programmed that way,
Yeah.
which is so I'm working on an article. So I've been on this whole the healthcare industry lies and they're suppressing alternative health thought and this whole thing. And so right now I'm working on a piece about the top diseases. So I picked the trifecta, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes. So, and usually people have all three together.
Yes. Yeah.
And so my little nugget today, and I'm just going to share this little nugget today. So when I looked at the top 50 health concerns, I mean, I'm focusing my study on the top three, but if you ask the question about the top 50 health concerns, and if you modify your diet and your lifestyle, can you kind of move them into the background? Can you get some kind of relief from what's going on? And there were like five genetic diseases that were in the top 50 that you couldn't do anything with because it was genetic.
Mm,
And everything else, you could get some relief. Like if you have active arthritis, you could reduce the amount of flare-ups, you could reduce the discomfort with diet, exercise, maybe supplementation, or if we're talking about diabetes, you can move it into the background where you are asymptomatic.
yeah.
But we have been programmed that, well, here's the food chart, and it's kind of optional. And like, don't eat fatty foods because it's bad for, your cholesterol. But there's never been this outspokenness about us taking responsibility for our health because they can give us a pill and it'll
Yeah.
be better.
Hmm.
And that's the sad and scary part to
Does
me.
it just end up manifesting as something else? I mean, because
Very
it's
much
still
so.
there. Yeah.
Very much so. I mean, there are people that will go and have their gallbladder removed, like that gentleman who still had that energy sitting in the gallbladder spot. And, that will back up into his liver, or it will maybe move into his lungs, because there are things that he wants to do, but he can't plan. It's now he's developed like grief over it,
Mm,
which is the emotion that will sit in your lungs. And then he might manifest some kind of respiratory issue. So unless you heal the emotional
yeah.
part, the mental emotional part, it very much can appear somewhere else.
Yeah. So you've been in this field for a long time. What's one healing moment that you witnessed that left you speechless or something that like conventional medicine could never explain?
I mean, I've had several miracles. So this is one of my personal favorite miracle stories. So I had a client come in and she had gone to her doctor and she had fibroids and the fibroids had started to bleed. And so she wanted to know if she could do anything and if she had enough time to do it so that she could get rid of the fibroids and not have to get surgery done. So
Mm.
that was the question. She wanted a second opinion. And so basically from a very functional level, I said, well, I feel like you have a window of about 6 months that if you go on this protocol hardcore and clean up your diet and like hardcore, that you can move it back into remission. I mean, and not just for the 6 months, but it would be enough to stop the bleeding. And when you're talking about fibroids, it's all about the bleeding. That's where
Yeah.
you have the life and death potential coming from. And then I kind of shifted gears and I looked at her and I go, do you have a boyfriend? And she said, yeah. And I just looked at her and went, you need to dump him. I mean, it just came out of my mouth and I kind of was blown away. And she said, why? And I said, well, you keep giving your emotional energy to him with the hope. And I repeated that with the hope that he is going to give it back. And
Mm.
that's what's sitting underneath the fibroids.
Wow.
And I give people information like that and they walk out the door and then that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
6 months later, I see her at an event and she runs over and gives me a giant hug and she goes, they're gone. And I'm like, what do you mean they're gone? She goes, the fibroids. I go, what'd you do? She goes, I dumped
And
them.
the boyfriend, he's gone
No.
too.
And she didn't do the protocol.
Yeah.
She just dumped him.
Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah. Wow. That,
Powerful story.
that
Yeah.
is crazy. That is crazy. Well, when someone comes to you for a healing for the first time, what can they expect? How does it go?
So for the first time, and I mentioned this earlier, I find, I'm very pragmatic and very time conscious that, people know where their alleys are. So if you want me to find them, I mean, I can spend the session finding it, maybe, because it might be something weird and obscure that I would never look for, per se. But if you have a complaint and you tell me what the complaint is and you give me an opportunity to kind of put it in a little box, then we can really kind of get to the core of it and separate out, how much of this is functional, what's the psycho-spiritual parts to it? What can you do about it? What about some supplementation? I mean, every so often I tell people you need to go to the doctor. You
Hmm.
need to this has moved past the point. And that is like what I hate to
Yeah.
have to tell someone, but sometimes that is the truth. Because it's not my goal to keep them as a client. It's my goal for them to be healthy.
Yeah. Exactly. Yep. So for someone standing at the beginning of their healing path, what's one small shift you'd want them to make before anything else?
And I mentioned this before because I feel like this is just really the key is to start paying attention to yourself. How do you feel inside? Do I feel good today? Am I sitting in a world of negative thinking? If I'm in this world of negative thinking, what's that about? Because once we start paying attention, then we can start sorting out what's going on. And, when you practice mindfulness, if you're in a barrage of negative thinking, but then you stop and go, wow, I have negative thinking, and just make that little comment to yourself. It will help stop the negative thinking and bring you
Yeah.
back into the present moment and help bring you back into alignment with source and help the body to relax and just start the process of change.
What do you say to people that are afraid to start the process? Because they're afraid what's going to come up.
You only be stronger on the other side. And happier. I was talking to somebody today, who's going through a lot of stuff, but they don't really want to get out of their own way
Mm.
and has a lot of negative thinking. And I just said, I'm not telling you my story to like make you feel bad for me, but like I kind of had a crappy childhood and I have scratched and achieved everything that I've have on my own, and have had crappy relationships, bad, like narcissistic people. I mean, just bad. But I had this history of negative thinking. Bad. And I finally came to the conclusion that I didn't want to do that anymore. I chose me. And I think people that don't want to start the healing journey, they have to choose them, whether
Mm,
that's going to the gym 1 day a week. Every time you go, you're choosing you. You cut out that cup of coffee, you're choosing you. And a lot of people don't choose themselves. They choose everybody else, but
yeah.
they don't choose themselves. And once I did that, the healing process just unfolded. And now I don't have negative thinking, which is something that I never thought was possible, ever, ever.
Mm, wow. How long did that journey take? I mean, it doesn't usually happen overnight, right?
I could see dramatic results in 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Dramatic. And I would say the whole process, I'll say 2 years. I started the process digging, 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 researching, ended up writing a book. Dang, it was me all along.
Mm.
Which,
I love that.
which doesn't chronicle my journey, but kind of does because I just tell you, it's like, well, I tried this exercise and it worked really good. And then there's this one. And, so it's not a memoir book because it's more of a self-help book, but I'm
Hmm.
kind of there holding your hand the whole way.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so by the time I had finished writing the book, it was like I was a completely different person. And it's like,
Wow.
wow, this is good.
Yeah.
Like I can smile on the outside and smile on the
Yeah.
inside.
Yeah. That's really freeing. It's amazing. So tell us where listeners can find you, what you're up to, all that good stuff.
So my webpage is soulhealer.com. That's soulhealer.com. It's loaded with articles. My new thing is this whole uh, programming of the world, and health stuff, which there's like 5 articles on there now under the healthy living section. And then every Thursday night, I do what's called Thursday Night Live with Dr. Rita Louise. And you can find that the easiest place is to go to YouTube. And my YouTube channel is Just Energy Radio. So that's 3 words, Just Energy Radio, 7 p.m. Central. Hit the live link, and that'll put you into the chat. And you can, listen to whatever I'm going to talk about that day and then get a free on air reading. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a
Well,
great group of
that
people
sounds
in
so
there
fun.
that hang out. It
Yeah.
is really fun. And I mean, and then there's me, which I never know what I'm going to say.
That's true. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you for sharing your insights and your energy and just your talents with everybody and us today on the show.
Thanks for having me. Great interview. Thank you.
I hope this episode gave you a new lens on healing, one that goes deeper than just physical symptoms. Maybe you're walking away with more compassion for what your body is trying to tell you. Maybe you're ready to stop avoiding your own emotional truth. Or maybe, just maybe, you're curious about what energy really has to do with it all. Whatever your takeaway, remember, healing doesn't have to be a solo journey, and it doesn't have to be hard. It just has to be honest. If you're looking for a deeper path inward, I'd love to support you with Somatic Mindful Guided Imagery, or SMGI. It's a gentle yet powerful practice for uncovering and healing the roots of emotional pain. Learn more or book a free consult with me at somatichealingjourneys.com. And hey, if you or someone you know has an out of the box healing modality to share on the podcast, I'm always looking for fresh, expansive voices. Reach out and email me at mindyourownkarma@gmail.com. Until next time, Karma Crew, and remember to take what you need and leave what you don't. And always remember to mind your own karma. I'll see you next time.